Welcome to the Shamrock Green Room, your favorite podcast highlighting everything about Scotus Central Catholic and Columbus Catholic schools. Each episode, we discuss what it's like to be a Shamrock. Whether that is a current student, a teacher, an alum, or supporter, we want to hear your stories on why this is such a special place in education. I'm your host, Jon Brezenski, 1998 graduate, former boys head soccer coach, assistant football coach, and current assistant coach for the girls soccer program. Today, I'm joined by Nathan Karges, 1996 Scotus graduate. He's been involved in many different organizations in Columbus and has helped to serve Scotus in several different roles. He's a good friend, and I'm looking forward to talking with him today. Nathan, thank you for coming in and being a guest in the Shamrock Green Room.
Hey, John, it's fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, with recording Kim's last week, it's kind of fun getting some friends in here, but also people that are serving the school in many different roles. So we'll kind of delve into all that today.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, as we start here, why don't you just give us some background on the Karges family, because your path into Scotus is quite a bit different than mine and different than Kim. So just kind of start with there.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm not multi-generational.
Mm-hmm.
I came in the fall of '93. So as a sophomore, my family's originally from Albion. My parents, Bruce and Kathy, grew up in Albion. I lived on a family farm that we raised turkeys. Mm-hmm. And when I was going into my sophomore year, I have three younger sisters, and we had decided to move to Columbus because we also had turkey farms in Schuyler. My dad was driving back and forth every day, and we thought it'd be better for the family to be closer to one. And so we decided to move to Columbus. I stayed in Albion to play football as a sophomore in Albion. This was previous to Boone Central.
Okay.
Lived with my grandparents back and forth, both my grandparents for that first quarter, and then came to Scotus for the second quarter.
Wow. So both your parents are from Albion?
Yep, they are. They both grew up there. My dad was a farmer. His family was a farmer. My mom's parents lived in town, and so yeah, it was kind of a fun growing up.
So then you guys had two family. So you had a turkey farm in Albion and a turkey farm in Schuyler?
Yep. So we had it originally was a dairy farm. So we had dairy, we had corn, and there was a big dairy buyout back in the early 80s. I remember taking I think it was probably my preschool class or maybe kindergarten class up to the dairy farm to do a little field trip. But then shortly after that, they converted to turkeys, and they had purchased a couple farms, actually, one north and one south of Schuyler.
Okay. So was it Karges Family Farms, or what was it called?
Yeah, Karges Brothers.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, it was fun.
Huh. So you have three younger sisters, and so they moved to Columbus before you did?
They did. So they moved in the summer. I have three younger sisters, so Elizabeth, Melissa, and Sarah. So Melissa graduated from Columbus High in '99. Elizabeth was Columbus High in 2000, and Sarah was 2002 at Scotus. So it was interesting. So when we were looking at schools, they all just went into the public school system right away. And my parents kind of gave me a choice of what I wanted to do. And so I came in and I went and looked at Lakeview. I went and looked at Columbus High. I looked at Scotus, and they were like, where do you want to go? I liked them all. Columbus High is too big for me coming from Albion. Scotus is closer to Christopher's Cove where we lived, and it just was a good fit. When I came and visited, the people were very welcoming. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we decided. And it wasn't until later on, I think Sarah started at Scotus maybe in junior high. Okay. So she stayed through the middle school until junior high and then came here.
What grade? So I guess what grade she would have been, like a fourth grader or fifth grader when they moved to town then?
Yeah, that'd be about right.
Really?
Yeah.
So what elementary school did she go to then?
I
don't remember.
Don't even know.
Huh.
No, I
didn't know that.
Yeah. So they all went through that, and it just worked out that Sarah decided to come over here, and the other two were happy where they were, so they stayed there, and it was kind of interesting. Now looking back, that happened, but at the time it wasn't that big of a deal, really.
I mean, I kind of remember. You're 2 years older than me in school, but I do kind of remember when you came, because I would have been, like I said, I would have been an eighth grader when you came, but because you came before your sophomore year, right?
Yeah. So right at sophomore.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do remember that when you came. And we'll kind of get into that because it's an interesting timeline of when you came and what was obviously going on here at school at the time. So let's just get into that then.
Yeah. So, I stayed to play football on a 3-5 team in Albion. But I actually played a little bit, so I got that going for me. Mm-hmm. But I show up here, and
Which would have been the fall of 93.
Fall of 93. Actually, Halloween of 93 was a Sunday night, and I was at home, I think, playing Super Nintendo, and I had school the next day, so I wasn't doing anything, and all of a sudden a knock comes to the door, and there's like 6 or 7, maybe more kids all at the front door saying, "Hey, can Nathan come out to play?" type of situation. And my parents were like, yeah, come up here. And it was weird because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I hadn't met anybody. And then all of a sudden there's all these kids there, and I'm like, well, sure. So I went out and
who was that? Who came to the door?
So who was at the door? I mean, it was pretty much my whole class. It felt like they ended up going out. I know that Ashley was one of them. Now my wife.
Yeah.
Like Johnny Obrist, Ben Johnson, I think might have been the one that like jumped in my house because he was kind of like that. And then Kelsey Krings, Chad Mustard, Sam Grouse, Chad Gonka. We ended up going to Chad Gonka's house and hanging out in his basement. And it was pretty cool because then I showed up the next day.
At Scotus.
At Scotus. My first day was the next day, and I showed up, and I didn't feel probably so new. You know, we walked into the old QFC class that we used to have, and Sam Grouse was in there with me, and so it was kind of fun. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a unique welcoming, I guess, because, you know, that doesn't always happen with a new kid coming in. You know, you kind of, especially, you know, a quote-unquote outsider from out of town.
Yeah. Well, Ashley especially, she's like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
Like, you got lucky.
Yeah.
But,
oh, absolutely.
You know, it was cool. I mean, that obviously, I think, probably affected moving forward just how you even feel about everything.
Socially and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun.
And so I remember, you know, I went to St. Anthony's, and I remember when Ashley and her family moved, because that was Rena, and Rena was in my class.
Yep.
And I remember their very first day in first grade, because Rena was in my room. And, you know, even back then, I just remember, and Rena and I talk about this quite a bit, but her, you know, the adjustment even at that age was hard. So imagine coming in as a sophomore.
Well, and I didn't want to move.
Yeah.
You know, I had my good friends in Albion. I grew up there, family, you know, loved where we lived. We lived right outside of town, right by the golf course. I could golf with everyone. I could drive around. I could drive to school. Like, I actually remember, it's funny, I actually drove to school even when I lived here and I was still 15. Just I'm like, well, I've been doing it for however long, and then pretty soon they're like, you can't drive. You're not 16.
Yeah.
So that got shut down.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Okay, so obviously the fall of 93. So you finished your high school football season up at Boone?
Yep. We finished the high school
Albion?
In Albion, yep. We obviously didn't make the playoffs with our record, and so we show up here, and it was
Albion, and Albion would have been Class B at the time? Or they
I don't know if they might have been C.
Okay.
I'm not even sure.
Okay.
But SCOTUS was B.
Yep.
And I show up, and pretty quickly, I don't remember how it happened, if I asked or somebody came to me, but the coaching staff allowed me to basically, I was like the ball boy. So I was hanging out on the sidelines with probably a lot of the trainers and freshmen. And so I remember going to Beatrice to that game where, you know, we had that huge comeback. I remember being at everything, and it's kind of interesting looking back because there wasn't many kids even on sophomores that played that year. I think Chad might have been the only one. And so it's not like I missed out on playing. Now I don't have a medal. I don't have the cool white jackets.
You weren't on the roster,
right, because I wasn't on the roster.
Yeah.
But I still felt part of it, which is kind of strange.
Well, and even back then, I mean, the teams were so deep in terms of upperclassmen and everything. So, like, as a goal as a sophomore was just to get on some type of special team.
Yeah.
I mean, when you guys were seniors, that was my goal.
Yep.
You know, I was fortunate to get on a special team.
Absolutely.
Just because the numbers were so big back then. But so what do you remember, I guess, in those first couple days or first, you know, weeks or so of transitioning? Because, you know, SCOTUS in the middle of the 93 state championship run. You're a new kid. What do you kind of remember just about those early weeks at school?
You know, it was a little bit of an adjustment. One of the things that I guess even brought me to SCOTUS was how the classes were set up. So in Albion, we were taking chemistry as sophomores. And here at SCOTUS, and it's still the same way, they take chemistry as juniors. And so I think I took either earth science or biology or something as a freshman. Well, when we were looking here, SCOTUS said, hey, we'll just put you in chemistry since you've already done a quarter of it. And maybe I had good enough grades that they thought I'd be okay with it. And so I remember being in chemistry class. Miss Dussel was the teacher. She was probably only a few years in at that stage. And I think
that would have been her. She came in, I think she came in 92, so that would have been like her second year.
Yeah, so it's still, you know, it was really good. I mean, she's obviously an awesome
Staple.
teacher. Yes.
She's an amazing
yes.
teacher.
And I got put into a group. So we had a chemistry lab or a big project we were doing. And my group was Brandon Drum and Joey Pilgowski. Mm-hmm. And Joey's still one of my great friends to today. But both of them, for football, they all shaved their heads. And I had these two huge dudes. I mean, Joey's probably not as big, but Brandon, he went on to, play at UNL, and they were in my group. But they brought me in. Like, it didn't feel weird. I think having those guys and being part of that made me fit in a little bit. And, it wasn't very long after I came here that we started doing some basketball stuff. So I was able to go and go to open gyms and then start practices while everybody else was still in football with a lot of the basketball guys. So it went pretty quick that way, I feel like.
And you mentioned you were in Mr. Mahoney's class. That was our class.
Yeah.
I remember you. I think you and I were in the same class, to be honest.
Yeah, when I
was reflecting on it, I was like, I do remember. Yeah, that Nate was in our class.
I was a junior with all the freshmen in Mr. Mahoney's class, and it was actually kind of fun because, maybe it was a little reprieve from everything else I was doing as a junior here that I got to be in a lower level class per se.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
And obviously, transferring in, I guess, what did you, as you kind of reflect a little bit, what do you remember? Do you remember things about SCOTUS prior to, like when you were living in Albion and you're kind of deciding, do you like the athletic history or the academic side of it? Do you remember any of that? Was that ever an influence?
Not really. I think the first time I knew SCOTUS was at state basketball, which would have been the year before, I guess, because we played Hardington that first round. I remember being at Pershing. I remember sitting in the front row at Pershing watching that, rooting for Hardington, because I think they had really cool haircuts. Like, they all were slicked back haircuts, and they were like, just a really athletic team. But that was like the first I really remembered or knew of SCOTUS, because I don't think back then Boone or Albion probably played SCOTUS in anything.
No.
So it wasn't until I came here and started, seeing, and obviously at that point when I was thinking about it, I started following, what was happening here. And I remember coming to that day when I did a tour, met with Gary Pitts, and he kind of walked around, and that was fun. Like, I felt very like, hey, you're part of us here.
Yeah.
Which was helpful from the admin.
Absolutely.
So,
so you meet Ashley. I mean, you and Ashley, that's kind of an interesting story.
It's funny. So we were Mrs. Matt's class, K&M, she's a Morris, must have been, close in nature. So we were at the same table, just the two of us at that table. And, we became friends. I think that, she hung out a lot with John Villadall and Johnny Obrist and them, and we'd all run around. And so I think we just socially were around a lot together. And then, it wasn't until our junior year, so that next year, that we kind of connected, went to homecoming together, and
as seniors,
as juniors. So we started dating as juniors, and so dated all throughout junior year, and then obviously still together. But
well, you also mentioned just in our pre-recording discussion here that there was a couple other guys in your class too that were similar situations where they were coming in as new guys, and you kind of connected with them.
So I want to say probably 7th grade year, Kelsey Krings had come in, and he's still a great friend today. He had come in, and then Joe Dirks came in as a freshman. Yeah. And maybe that helped me coming in, because we'd had some other guys that had fit in right away, because I felt like they were fitting in, or at least when I was there, they fit into the group of people in our class. We have a pretty tight class, at least the guys do. And so I think that helped. I wasn't here when either of them came. I think, if I remember right, Joe had a mohawk. And it was like he came from Washington.
They came from Seattle. Yeah. Because Andrew, his younger brother, was in my class too. Yeah. And they had a little bit longer hair, which was a little bit out of the norm back then. So I just remember when Andrew had to get his hair cut a little bit, that was kind of a big deal.
Yeah. I think the same way with Joe.
Yeah. So. But also you lived, you mentioned you lived at Christopher Cove, and a lot of your classmates, ironically, are there, which it kind of became your friend group.
It did. It was, Chad Gonka, Heidi Hinn, Shauna Greiner. There was a couple other kids in our class that maybe we didn't hang out with as much, but I mean, it was once summer hit, a lot of us had jobs like that we could work in the morning. So like I worked with my dad at the farm until like, I don't know, noon or 1 or whatever it was. And then it was like pretty much we'd all show up and there'd be groups at the lake that we'd all end up meeting. Like, oh, hey, we're going to be at Gonka's today. Oh, we're going to be at Hins's today. You know, Grinders had a nice volleyball court that we'd all go play sand volleyball on. And it, I think, really did. It helped me get to know people sooner because that was, you know, a little bit into my sophomore year. But we were one of the places people hung out at, which I think my parents loved too because
they got to meet different people.
They got to see people and they were always here. They always had, you know, Doritos and Pepsi.
Yeah.
So I remember people would come over and like, it was very open to where, hey, just come in and grab whatever you wanted. And so I think I think to today even, you know, the good friends I have came from a lot of that. Just goofing around, kneeboarding, skiing, doing all the things.
And your class was always kind of pretty close. That 96 group was pretty close.
Yeah.
Got pretty close with some of those 97 guys too.
We did. Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's just start kind of getting into, we'll talk about kind of your senior year of high school. So 95 season, you know, coming off, you know, the state championship in 93, 94, you guys, you know, you ended up losing in the semis to Aquinas. So 95, and those two classes were big classes.
Yep.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of, not like Chad probably played as a sophomore, but then the next year was,
I think,
didn't play much. A lot of you guys didn't play a whole lot either. Some different roles because Jason's class was really big.
Yes.
You know, so now going to 95, and that's my sophomore year. And just nobody knew really what to expect. But let's kind of touch on that because that ends up being a really, really good season.
It did. And I think it goes back a little bit to the work ethic that a lot of our class put in, just in all sports in general. But, you know, we were fortunate. We did have some big linemen. Like I think some of, you know, Vildal and Cal Wemhoff and some of those guys, I think probably played a little bit Fendrick.
Yep.
And so that helped us coming in because we weren't small. We were big on the line. Your class, we had a lot of good contributors from your class. Aaron Laginza, you know, Jason Hartzina played a little bit in the background. Yeah. It was, and then our juniors as well, who we got connected pretty well with. I think it was almost like it felt like it was the juniors and seniors were kind of the leaders versus just the seniors, because frankly, we were all on the same footing outside of a handful of people that played the year before. You know, I was on special teams and that as a junior. But I think there was a little bit of a chip, like, hey, like, you guys aren't going to be any good. I think I remember reading, you know, Jim Pitts was that way anyway, like, we're going to be terrible, and, you know, these guys can't do anything. And, you know, we probably took that a little bit to heart and really worked hard. We had depth, I think, that was helpful as well. It wasn't just, and we're all on the same footing, so we had Aaron Laginza, one of our, I think he either started or Lenny Sliva started at tailback. You know, me and Chad Gonka worked through quarterback back and forth a little bit throughout the year. Sam Grouse, who ended up being all-state, you know, him and Matt Maracek, you know, rotated in tight end. Nick Maracek. And so, you know, I think that brought us together too because we had so many guys that were playing and like to that. And it was great. It was a fun season. Like,
well, and to your point, I mean, Sam didn't even play really as a junior.
No.
At all.
I don't think he did either.
Yeah, I mean,
he put the work in.
Yeah, he did.
He really committed to it. And I think I remember being
your whole class was like that too, though. Like you said, you know, your whole class kind of, hey, this is, you know, we're not going to let this slip. And that was kind of the mindset back then of, even when we were through school all the time, it was like, okay, well, you don't want to be the class that slips.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we had a good regular season. You know, we went down and lost to Aquinas at Aquinas, which that's always a tough place to play. You know, and then got to get them back in the playoffs, which was fun.
I just remember that first game we played at Mount Michael.
Yes.
Opening kickoff.
Lenny Sliva.
Yeah.
Takes
the opening. To the house.
I remember I think it was when Taylor started uploading some videos. I remember going back and watching the first part of that game. And sometimes it's hard to see some of those old grainy videos, but you could clearly see Lenny running down the sideline. And like, what a great start of a season. Yeah. What a way to get you going. And I remember that game. It might have been like the first defensive play. I rolled my ankle. And so from then on, I taped my ankle all of sports my senior year because that one dumb play where I stepped wrong in a hole or something.
We were playing on that Elkhorn Middle School field, which is
Yep.
Elkhorn Middle School field has had a bit of a crown in it.
Yeah. Well, that's probably what it came from. But no, I mean, that was fun. That was, I mean, how cool to start a season that way.
Yeah. And as the season goes, I mean, we lose to Aquinas in the regular season in a really tough game, but continue to go on a roll. And I just remember that sets up for the homecoming game with Battle Creek at home, and they were number 1 at the time.
Yeah.
You know, and we ended up beating them 24-0.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I think looking back, we're like, there's no way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these guys are these big boys coming in.
Dave Volk was on the team. He ended up playing in Nebraska.
Yeah.
They were just good. Euler.
Yeah.
Yep.
They were just big. I remember I was on punt return, and they were going for it, and we didn't call timeout or anything. So I moved up to linebacker on the punt return, wherever I was, and I just got rocked so hard because one of those big boys just came through and took me out. But
I was the middle. I was the on the punt return team. I was the middle linebacker, so I had to pick up the center as they came through, and they were.
Yeah, so we probably were next to each other getting killed.
And I wasn't a big guy. I was only about 150 pounds, but oh man, picking up those big boys coming down was tough.
Yeah, it was awesome though to win 24-0. Then go on. I mean, how cool is it to then have your homecoming dance? And back then, the dance was after the game, so go get cleaned up, find out who it is. Ashley was homecoming queen, which was kind of fun. Her and John Villadol, and so that was fun.
I do remember the week prep going into that game, because they, like I said, they were number one. Yep. But we were playing really good though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But as the game went on, it was just, I think Matt Boguy might have had a scoop and score, I think, that game.
You're right. I do remember that.
Right before halftime, which kind of gave us a little cushion.
Momentum is so much in those big games too. Like, you realize, hey, we can hang with them.
I do remember though how wild that dance got. It was pretty wild down there.
Well, I mean, huge game, right? You're celebrating it. So
I mean, we end up going into the playoffs.
Yep.
And we beat Lakeview in the first round. Come back at Aquinas. Great game. Let's walk through that because that's an overtime game.
Yeah, so that was a back and forth again at Aquinas, and the way they run their offense, you got to stay home everywhere because you don't know where the ball's coming out of, and they're always good, but they had some pretty salty players there. But we go down, get to overtime, we score first, kick the field goal. We had Chris Langham was All-State that year.
Yeah.
He kicked a heck of a field goal.
Amazing.
He kicked 50-yarders. They score and they go for it, and so we're out there, and I was left cornerback, and I was fortunate to have Mustard on my side, which was made it easier for me. But they run a little, it was a pass fake bootleg out to the right, which is interesting because the quarterback was a lefty, but they run out to the right, and Mustard surrounds him. He doesn't get much chance to throw, and he tosses it up, and it comes at me, and I just knock it down. Like you think, hey, grab it, get the interception, but I just knocked it down, and I just remember our whole sideline just swarming, and it was almost dangerous because I think at that field, you got your parents, everybody right there as well, and I think the crowd just
it was. I remember rushing the field and everybody was just running around.
It was. I was like, oh my gosh, hopefully it's over.
Yeah. I think that year even. In the Telegram was right there on the field too because they snapped a couple pictures. I think I was standing over Jason Herdzina who was laying on the ground, and that's the picture that made the paper.
Oh, seriously? That's awesome.
But I remember you knocking the ball down, and we just took off running. I remember, I think it was late in the game. If I recall, I think Chad scored a late touchdown to tie the game.
I think he did. I think it was he scrambled or something. He broke they were going back to passing.
Score on the west end of the field.
Yep.
I just remember that. Yeah, just things you just remember real clearly. But so then that leads into next week we go to Wahoo.
Yeah.
Cold as you know what.
Coldest I've ever been.
They were good too. Josh Anderson was their guy. And I just remember the week to prep up on that was you got to stop him, and he was good. He was good that night. He was.
He we played. I felt like we did a pretty good job containing him. Maybe because it was cold too, but we had a good game plan. It was hard because I think a couple things, I don't know if going against us, but it rained the whole week. I don't even think we got on the field that week. We were in the old gym practicing. And then, we'd just come off this high of beating Aquinas. That's, and I don't know if it's looking at a letdown, but gosh, and I don't remember if it was Sam that blocked it or Beller, a touchdown game from a blocked punt, scoop and score.
I just remember I was the middle linebacker on that team, and I remember as we broke through, Dan scooped it up. And I was right behind Dan as he ran it in. That was our only score that game, but at the moment, it was a big deal at that point because it tightened the game up.
Well, didn't that create it to be 7-6? I think because then we're going out, and I remember I don't think I was on the field. I'd come off for the end of the third quarter. They were about there probably 30, 35-yard line. It was like a 2nd and 8 or something. I think they did a fullback dive just to kill the clock. And somehow or another, the guy squirted through and scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
And it was just like deflating. Like, oh my gosh, all this work and then boom.
Yeah.
So, but
it was still, I mean, unfortunately that ended our season, but they go on and, they're Battle Creek ended up being the runner-up that year.
Milford beat Battle Creek, and I think we ended up rated 4th, maybe 3rd even. Like, we got rated pretty high, I think.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
We're a good team.
We did.
Yeah. So we'll transition then into the basketball season, which again becomes very, very memorable. And honestly, you guys are probably one of the best teams that Scotus has ever had.
Yeah.
You guys start on a tear. Guys start undefeated throughout the year. You have that great game with GICC.
That was probably one of the most fun games I've ever been involved in.
And I didn't go out for basketball that year, so I was in the student section. But 94-84 here at our place.
And everybody knew. For the most part, CJ Kogel and what he could do. And they actually, Jeff Riley on their team had 25 that night, I want to say, too. So they had a guy that had 47, a guy that had 25. And if you go back and watch that film, it's just up and down.
It was.
And, I think Mustard might have been our X factor because they didn't really have anybody that could handle him inside. And they got content with just shooting because we were scoring the whole time. And gosh, it was just fun because the crowd was in it, and CJ, he liked to talk to the crowd, so our guys were all talking crap back and forth. And that's another one that me and Vivian were actually watching that film about a month ago, and you can hardly see it because it's so grainy.
Yeah, and the lighting in the gym.
Lighting was so bad.
Yeah.
But you can tell the vibe of it, how fun that was, and so that was a big win, just getting them, and because they were. They went to state that year, and they were always good. He's one of the leading scorers in the state history.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so that's a game. Your first loss that year, you end up losing to Aquinas. At home here in Scotus. But that was a good team too. Aquinas was solid.
Well, they won state the next year.
Yep.
So current David City girls basketball coach Jason Campbell is their head coach. He was a junior on that team, and there was a Samick on that team as well.
Yep.
That were really good. I remember being, they're a good team. I remember being at the free throw line near the end of the game, and Jason looking at somebody else saying, "We just beat the number one, probably blanking team in the state." And I was like, it just kind of hits you like, dang it, like here we go, let's get back at it.
Yeah.
So,
but you guys regroup and you go on you put together 5 more wins in a row and get you to the conference championship game.
Yep.
And then you end up facing a Lincoln Christian team who was really good that year too.
They were good. They were tall. I mean, they had a Dreville kid. We played them at Newman. And I remember that was really cool too. I want to say that we had to move up the game because it was so either snowy or cold. So we played it like in the middle of the afternoon at Wahoo Newman, and the vibe wasn't great. It just didn't feel very strong.
Game, like a primetime game.
It didn't at all. And, we came home from losing that game, and we ended up having a team meeting, and we're like, hey, guys, like, this is the real deal. Like, we can't lose anymore. Let's get going. And we all kind of came together with the coaches, too. And, Coach Lom and Coach Brockhouse were our coaches at the time. And I think that just lit another fire to say, okay, hey, let's finish this thing.
Yeah. And you guys do regroup because you end up, basically winning on out until the end of the year. You handle the rest of the teams on the schedule pretty much until that first round of sub-districts in Lakeview, who you'd beaten by about 25 points a couple weeks before. That's a close one, 49-48 in the first round. So think about that. No
wild cards back in the day, so you lose, you're done. And it was one of those. Obviously, we weren't prepared mentally to probably fight hard enough as we should have. And they gave us a game. Credit to them. I mean, they stepped up. I think Graham Jura, who used to be at Scotus, he played for that. He was in that class.
Yeah.
So, but we got it done, and we played that over in Schuyler, I believe, because then we played Aquinas the next night or the next game. So, and got them back.
So you beat them, which is a good win. Then it sets up the Newman final, which you beat them by 20, which sets up then now first round of state tournament. And Coach Lom had told me this before, and I didn't remember this about that. But the seedings back in that time were based on regular season record only. There was obviously there was no wild card points because there was no wild card, so it was based on pure record. And turns out number 1 versus number 2 in the first round state tournament.
Yeah.
Which is really a state championship game.
4 or 5. I think that year's Kimball maybe was the 1 seed who played O'Neill their first game, the 8 seed, and O'Neill handled them. And so you look back and say, gosh darn it. It was
different draw and something probably happens a little different.
It likely would have.
Yeah.
That was the old Pershing. So, yeah, it was, yeah.
But again, I think you guys kind of, that whole season was a good mix of your class.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the juniors behind you with Nick and Doug and Dan. And, those
Lenny,
guys played quite a bit. Lenny played. I know Herdzina suited up from my class. I think maybe Frank, but that was a solid team. And a couple plays go here and there. Simons gets the tip in.
Yeah, you go back and look, and there's so I think we had like 25 turnovers that game too. Like it's probably a little bit of the pressure, right? Being there, being in the spotlight, and they're obviously a good team. I remember leading up to that game, they always ran this 1-3-1 like 3/4 court trap, and we would have the practice team would have 6 or 7 against us out there just to like try to say, hey, they're going to be all over the place, and they were, but we still, had a chance to win the game.
Yeah.
We're up 1, they go down, and Josh Anderson shoots. I want to say it's almost like it was forced. It was at the top of the key. Again, Josh Anderson from football too. And it just so happened Mike Simons, who ended up he went to UNO, All-American. He might be the UNO leading scorer ever. Made a good play, tipped in. It almost looked like a volleyball tip, kind of set how he did it. Just kind of tipped it back. He was falling back, came back. I think Nick Marachek had even checked him out and just
made a good play.
What do you do?
Yeah, what can you do? I mean, but it doesn't downplay your guys' season. You end up number 1. I think you end up number 2 that year.
2 or 3. We might have been 3, but just because St. Paul was in the final against New Wahoo. But
But still, I mean, as the years have gone on, we got alumni basketball coming up this weekend, right?
Yeah.
But for the longest time, your class was the team in alumni basketball.
Yeah, when we came back, that was back in the day. We'd get our whole team back together, and it's interesting because how we do the alumni basketball, it's at least early on, you try to have just your class. We were a really good mix in 95 and 96, or 96 and 97. But we were just 96, and we would compete pretty hard coming back here. And I remember playing one of the teams, like this was fairly recently, probably in the last 10 years. We played one of the young teams that came out that was really successful, and we beat them down pretty well. And I think they were like, who are you old guys? Because this was like 20 years after we graduated. And I remember talking to it was Lisa Castellan, actually, and she came out to me at Glurs like after Gala or something. She was like, I looked you guys up. You must have been pretty good. Because, I think she's like, how did you beat my son so much? And, I mean, we were.
And there's a lot of pride in the alumni basketball thing.
You do.
And there still is.
You do. It doesn't change.
It's fun, and that's just like with alumni soccer, same deal.
Yep.
Our class still kind of holds their own, but it's fun. It makes it fun. I'm looking forward to it this weekend. It'll be another good weekend. We got a good turnout for it. So that's kicking off on Friday night. But so obviously we'll transition now into the spring of '96. Is you're a golfer.
I'm a golfer.
You're a good golfer. You can smack the ball. So golf in '96, you guys had a solid team. A lot of good golfers on that. Now, as you look back, you, Chad, Bodie, Ross, Ryan Schneider.
Yeah.
That's a pretty darn good first 5.
We had a really good season. We won conference. I think we had one of the best records or best scores. Now, the kids lately have been phenomenal. Like, we wouldn't probably touch some of the recent Scotus teams, but really good season. Won conference. Had districts the next week at Quail, and we all laid an egg. Nobody qualified for state. And we're here thinking, hey, we're going to probably win this. We're all going to go. And really crappy day out, and golf is hard. There's some days it's
a game of elements.
It is, and but it didn't change the fact that it was fun.
Yeah.
Jim Pitts was our coach, first year coach. He didn't do a whole lot of coaching.
Yeah.
He pretty much drove us to the events, and I remember it. But practices were fun because we all, especially as a senior, you're kind of like, hey, this is just
It's a good time. I mean, with the grind of football, the grind of basketball, you get into spring
a lot
sports
more low key.
Yeah,
especially with that. And one of the funny things is, though, and we didn't have to do it this year, but the previous years, we used to have a thing called football track, if you remember. Gary and Jim were like, if you're going to play football, you're going out for spring sport, and golf doesn't count. And so me and Chad, because we were good enough at golf, they allowed us to golf and still play football, but we had to come to the gym, come to Scotus 2 to 3 times a week. And I remember running the stairs in Memorial Hall and probably running through the halls a little bit because we're going to keep in shape, right, for football in the fall.
But that was always a big thing back then for those guys, and that was just a testament to those guys to keep kids active and some activity.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, and encourage those things.
And you look at the numbers too. I mean, there was always big numbers, and they were successful. Like it worked.
Yep. Well, we'll kind of go off topic here a little bit, but again, in our pre-recording discussion, you mentioned something in one of our exchanges about midnight mass with Father Wayne. Let's talk about midnight mass, just something for the listeners.
So Father Wayne Pavella, he was actually on campus, was a teacher, and he coached soccer. He started the soccer program, didn't he? Which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to get him on the podcast. So
I'm
having a hard time convincing him to come on. So Father, if you're listening,
come on,
we
Father.
Need you.
Yeah,
But midnight mass was fantastic.
Oh yeah, so we would Saturday night, midnight, St. Anthony's held a mass, and I mean it was predominantly probably Scotus kids because it was a way for us to stay out a little bit later. A lot of times we go have breakfast or whatever after, but it was just a really cool feeling. I remember I was talking to Ashley about this, and she's like, she remembers, we did the Our Father and everybody would hold hands. So
around the altar. So
everybody would come up around the altar as he was preparing everything. We'd hold hands, and it was a quick mass. It was probably 35, 40 minutes. But then you could sleep in the next day. And at the very end, he'd always say, the mass never ends. Yeah. And you'd have everybody repeat it. And so it was I don't know how long that went on or when they stopped it. But
after Father left, Father left in 97.
Oh, was it 97?
Yeah, it was my junior year. And then it kind of went away.
Yeah.
But it was not only the students, but obviously a lot of the parents would come. Yeah. Or there'd be parents, there'd be parishioners, regular parishioners, and everybody came up around the altar. I was telling at work this morning, I was actually telling my coworkers about this, about midnight mass. Yeah. And the bats.
The bats.
Bats flying through St. Anthony's Church.
Yeah.
I was telling them about, I just remember one time Father was I remember that. Saying the Eucharistic prayer and going through the part of the mass, and the bat like swoops at his head. He doesn't even break. He maybe flinches a little bit, but he doesn't break stride. Doesn't break a sentence. Just keeps going. But then the bat just kept flying around and swooping through the crowd, and everybody's kind of ducking out of the way.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Well, Father's used to it probably.
Yeah. So yeah, I would like to get Father on the podcast. I think it would be a great interview because he did so much for the school. So much.
He did, not only starting the soccer, but even just like with community service, the garden, he would, I remember going out and working at the garden because he had the garden just, east of town that kids would come and then he'd donate that. And I mean, I think he's still doing that with a lot of the kids from Humphrey too, when he was there.
And he had the tree farm. So like, when I was in junior high, Father would pick me up. I'd go mow his tree farm. Eventually, Sean ended up doing that. Yep. Sean did that after me, your brother-in-law.
Yep, Sean Mohat.
So that was kind of fun. But yeah, I hopefully we can get Father on here because I think he's got a great story to tell.
Oh yeah, he'd always talk about the Cubs.
Yeah,
big Cubby fan.
So you graduate and then you go off to Nebraska Wesleyan. What was your major there? What was your major at Wesleyan?
Business admin. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went there, just basic business classes, and being a liberal arts institution, you had to take some type of fine arts. So I ended up taking German because I had German at Scotus here. Took German, ended up taking a German minor. There was so Jason Cumberland, who's from here as well, was in German, and so it was kind of fun to be around him. I was not nearly as good as speaking it as him, but that led me to, one of I'd say my biggest regrets, I always tell people, is I did not study abroad during college, especially being in German. We had teachers and professors saying, hey, you should go study abroad. There's this program, and I think I told you this. I remember saying, well, but Husker football, we're going to win the national championship. I can't miss going to those games. And how silly is that to think back now? Yeah. But it wasn't until my senior year, probably about October my senior year, I was like, hey, I should go study abroad. And I remember talking to our international relations person, and she's like, you graduate in May. It probably doesn't make sense to study abroad. Go work abroad. That's an option. And so we started looking into some different programs where you could go get a work visa, go somewhere and study. And, I think being that I wish I would have stayed abroad, we ended up doing that and ended up going to Australia. And Australia came partly because I could speak English, so I didn't have to go immerse myself because, if I don't have to. Yeah. Plus the Olympics were happening, Sydney Olympics, and I remember thinking, game on, let's go.
I do remember that because you had a role there.
Yeah, so
touch on that.
Yeah, so I graduate, and it's funny though because Ashley and I are still dating at the time, and back then you didn't I think I had a laptop, but everybody went to the computer lab, and you had to go get a computer and rent it or whatever, reserve it. And I remember looking at this program, turn around to Ashley and say, "Hey, you want to go to Australia?" She was like, "Yeah, let's go." And it was like, okay. So we started looking more into it, and so we graduate in May. We get all our stuff together, and in July we fly to Sydney, Australia. We flew there with all our bags. We didn't have jobs. We didn't have a place to stay. All we had was a work visa, and there was a program coordinator. Like you could go to a facility and they'd help you. And so we show up at this place, and they're like, "All right, you should probably find a place to live." So we got out the newspapers because you didn't have an internet really. You went and looked for it. Got out the newspaper, started circling. Let's go check this place out. Let's go check this place out. And started walking the streets, looking for places to live, calling around. We found a place to live with a nice couple, woman that owned a clothing store off of Bondi Beach, which is just on the outskirts of Sydney. So then we had to go find jobs. And I remember walking in downtown Sydney, and I went and applied for this marketing job and thinking, oh, this would be kind of fun. Well, I ended up finding out it's basically like selling like pedicures door to door to businesses. And I remember being dejected, saying, well, that didn't go very well. And walking into a sports store in Sydney, and the people that were there, so when at least then, they were looking for casual workers. So people like me who had work visas. Not many Americans did it. It was mostly the English and people from Europe, Canadians. And I go apply. I was like, hey, I'll go work at a sports store in Sydney. That'd be kind of fun. Learn Australian football and all these things. And end up getting a job. I think they liked me because I was a Yank. Oh, we've never had an American work for us. And so they hire me. But when I first start, they also had the rights to what was called the general store at the Athletes Village. So where all the athletes and officials lived.
For the Olympics.
For the Olympics in Sydney. They had the rights to that store, so they stocked it, they ran it. And I was basically a grunt for 2 weeks because they needed just somebody who wasn't on schedule yet. So I went and stocked shelves. I was, transporting stuff back and forth, carrying things around. But I had to get accredited to do that. They had to put me through the background checks because I was in this place that was very secure. And at the end of kind of that 2 weeks, I said, well, I'm already accredited. I know the product. Why don't you just let me work here? And they let me. And I don't think they kind of promised it to a lot of other employees because it's kind of a big deal to be in the Olympics.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of snuck in there and ended up basically being like an assistant manager at this store where, we sold souvenirs, we sold candy, we sold, all sorts of books, random things to people. We had a little bit of a black market cigarette selling spot because the officials wanted to smoke, but you can't have smoking in the village. And so, but one of the coolest things was we had a dry cleaner that was in the back of our store. And I remember when the dream team brought all their clothes there and how cool that was. Oh my gosh, here's all these guys' jerseys, Kobe and all them. But it was a fun experience because I got to meet all sorts of people from all over the world. And outside the biggies, the dream team, obviously they didn't stay there, and some of the real top-notch swimmers, but pretty much everybody else stayed in the village. So you'd walk in oh, you won the gold medal in gymnastics last night. You
kind of saw those people.
It was cool. Yeah. And, it'd be funny because you'd have these little, I should say little, but, small in stature girls that would come up and buy 6 candy bars because they're now done.
Yeah.
They're no longer competing, so they can just get after it.
Yeah.
Eat.
Awesome.
So, yeah, that was fun.
And that kind of springboards into a role you mentioned in the O2 Salt Lake Winter Olympics?
Yeah, so we spent that ended up being between the Olympics and Paralympics and set up about 6 months there. And the guy that was head of the village in Sydney was actually from Colorado Springs. And so I knew I didn't know what I was going to do coming back. And I said, hey, can you get my resume to, whoever over in Salt Lake? And so one of his best friends was the head of the village in Salt Lake. And so I got my resume sent to that person.
Directly.
And so it was pretty much like, not a no-brainer, but kind of like, hey, where do you want to be?
Yeah.
What role can you have? And so I actually worked for the organizing committee in Salt Lake for about a year, not quite a year. I was in Salt Lake from it.
That's pretty neat.
So, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of an Olympics nerd now. It's like I love the Olympics. And I would say previous to this, I didn't.
Yeah.
I just,
And that carries you. I mean, so you kind of fill those roles over the years.
Yep.
What eventually then leads you and Ashley back into Columbus?
Gosh, it seems like forever ago. So we traveled together, I guess, one of the things, and we ended up getting engaged, actually, as we traveled. So we spent time, we traveled about 2.5 months around Australia. There was this there's this bus that you could get on and get off different towns. So we'd get on a bus for a little bit, hang out for a couple days, get on the bus, go the next day. And we did that there. We went to Southeast Asia, spent some time. Then we went to Europe. Nate Blesson, who was an awesome basketball player at CHS, we stayed with him for a little while. He was playing professional basketball there. Connected with Jason Cumberland in Europe. In Germany, he was on a Fulbright there. I actually had to get a root canal started because I had abscess in my tooth.
Oh, no.
From playing flag football in college.
Oh,
so,
geez.
I was in severe pain. But anyway, we ended up, I bought a ring for her in Sydney or somewhere in Australia. I don't think it was in Sydney. And I was carrying it with me thinking, when's the right time to do this? I know I want to do this. I just don't know when. And I bought it before Christmas, and I didn't propose until Valentine's Day in Italy. And so it was pretty awesome. We went and, a couple days. So we end up calling her family and say, hey, this happened. And we got to see the installation of some cardinals in Rome a couple days before that. And I remember her grandma saying, you should have got married by the Pope. And it was just so funny just seeing her say that.
Yeah.
And so we end up getting married after Salt Lake. So we got married, went to St. Louis for about 1.5 years. I was working for an advertising agency that had been the face of Hallmark flowers. So Hallmark had a flower division at the Olympics in Salt Lake. So I got to know them really well. Moved to St. Louis, worked for them. Well, Ashley ended up getting a job back in Nebraska at Nebraska Wesleyan. So we figured that was a pretty good opportunity. I mean, I was having fun, but it was just kind of still an entry-level type thing I was doing in St. Louis. So we moved back to Lincoln. I had a couple odd different jobs. She was at Wesleyan. Then I ended up getting into advertising in Lincoln. But that wasn't my end-all be-all. And I remember calling Joe Dirks, who we talked about earlier, who was my class here and a good friend of mine, and saying, hey, man, can you help me get a job? I'm looking for something different. And I remember meeting with Joe, and he's like, yeah, hey, I'll help you out. And he's like, here's somebody you should call. Here's a client of mine, and here's somebody I know pretty well, and here's this person. He's like, hey, you should look at us too. This was at Northwestern Mutual. Mm-hmm. And I was like, insurance, investments? That sounds terrible, dude. I'm in marketing. I don't know numbers. And I was like, I'll listen to you. And so I ended up going through that process, and I think a lot through Joe, just knowing I had somebody in my corner to help me start a new business. And so I started that in 2008, the fall of 2008 in Lincoln. So we were in Lincoln. At the time, we had Ian and Sophia, who 1.5, 2 years old. Things went well. I enjoyed it. But I also came back this way a lot. That was back before you did a lot of Zoom meetings and all this, online type stuff. You met in person with folks. And so I was coming back to Columbus. I was coming back to Albion. And when we found out we were pregnant with Samantha and Vivian, we kind of really got serious about maybe we should move back. And we were kind of the ones like, we're never going to be back in Columbus. We're going to go out and spread our wings. But as we started to have more kids and more activities and our parents being here, we thought, this isn't a bad thing. Maybe we should try it. And so that led us back here in 2011.
Okay.
So
you guys moved back in 2011?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, it was July of 2011. So my sister got married in Mexico in May. So we went did that thing, came back, basically packed up our house, and moved here in July. So hot, very hot.
Yeah, and Aubrey was born like a couple weeks later. I
Oh,
remember.
was she?
Yeah. So, and you guys moved back at that time. We talked to Kim last week.
Dreesens were the same time.
Back. We were back. Gonkas are back. Angie and Brett are back. So there's kind of this group of people around all of our eras that all kind of were good friends or friends and acquaintances throughout the year, which was kind of neat to start getting more people back in town.
I think that helps too. I think it helps seeing that it's people that had been somewhere else and then moved here, because there's a reason they're probably moving here. And we didn't know Dreesens. I mean, obviously knew Kim, but didn't know her well. Mm-hmm. But then we lived in the same area of town. We were both going to St. Bon's. We started connecting with them pretty well, and I think that helped us as we got here. Kids are all in the same classes, so that's kind of fun too.
Yeah. And it's been fun to just obviously watch all those kids grow up together.
It makes it neat for sure.
And so, you're kind of back now. You're getting established with Northwestern Mutual.
Yep.
But then you start to transition into a role, getting more involved in school, Scotus, getting more involved in the community. What's kind of take me through that path now as you kind of have continued in those different roles? So
that was one of the reasons that I wanted to be back here too. I always felt like I enjoy, giving back. I enjoy being part of things. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that, and not that you can't do that other places, but there was just something different, I think, being in a smaller community to where you can do that. And so when we moved back, I remember so this would have been August. I remember going to the first football game and seeing Wayne Moorfeld, who was the president at the time, and he's like, "Hey, you're back, huh? What sport you going to coach? Where am I going to put you?" And I remember laughing, saying, "Wayne, I got these young kids. That's not going to work." So I didn't get into coaching right away, but I remember pretty quickly getting connected with someone at the Simon House. I think Jim Bulkley might have called me. And so I was on the Simon House board for a little bit. And then that's about that same time Sammy's Superheroes started, the organization started. And I got asked to be on that board pretty early. Like I wasn't part of the original, people that started it, but then I was on the first full board, which was enjoyable. There's a lot of obviously Scotus people that are involved in that too. And that was pretty close to all our hearts here. And from there, I think it just kind of led me to how can I help? Right. I was part of that. I was part of the Elks board for a number of years. And I remember actually being at an event with Casey Baylitz. And somebody had said, "Hey, you want to join this or to be part of this?" And Casey looked at them and said, "No, he can't do that. He's doing too much." Because I think it was stressful because not even the fact that I had 4 little kids at home, 2 fairly infants, toddlers, even with Vivian and Samantha. So
yeah, but it is kind of hard, you get, and that honestly kind of happened with me too when I got back. Mm-hmm. You get involved in different things, and then you get asked to do something else, and you go, "Oh yeah, I can kind of help with that." And then before you know it, you almost, not that you feel overwhelmed, but at the same time, you're like, I know I kind of went through that. It was like you're spending all this time with this young family, but you're really not home a whole lot.
It's hard.
It is hard.
You got to discern what really gives you the juice to. Are you doing it just because you like to help, or are you doing it because you're really emotionally tied to it? I was still reffing basketball at the time too, and so I was probably really crazy. And it's crazy to think Ashley's still with me after thinking back, oh my gosh,
I kind of think that with Christy too, with some of these things that I've done. It's like, man, it's hard. You just got 4 little kids, 2 sets of twins, which is even tougher.
It's hard, but I we're through that. We can look back and say, wow, we made it. Yeah. But at the time,
you've been involved in the holiday tournament, right?
Yeah, that was one of the things that when I stopped reffing. So back when Ian and Sophia were in 3rd grade, that's when we kind of started our Rocks basketball program for the majority of people. I, with a few dads, Scott Cameron, Jay Pellon, Joe Steffensmeyer, we said, hey, we'll coach that 3rd grade boys team. And so when I decided that, I said, I'm going to get out of reffing. But I still had this twinge to want to be involved, at the higher level. And so I remember reaching out to somebody, I don't know if it was Todd Halligan or someone else, that said, hey, can I be part of this committee? And so I've been on the the chamber holiday tournament committee for however many years that is, which is fun. I mean, we don't have to do a ton, but we're around, which is kind of cool to be part of that and see, be part of the community too.
Yeah. And you're part of the Booster Club. I think I got you.
You wrapped me into that. Hey, it's no big deal.
I think it was my time getting out. I was like, I need to find someone.
That's usually what it is. Hey, we have 2 weeks left. Who we bringing on? Yeah. But I enjoyed that. Like, I feel like and I think it was a transition when you were on it, as far as we changed a little bit of the rules. I got involved in doing the gate scheduling, and I think we even gotten better at how we do that with some of the programs that we can do now to send out the gate. But I'll tell you what, I don't get anxious very much. But when I didn't have a gate worker at 4:00 on a game day, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst ever.
Yeah, it's a lot of a lot of emails back then. But and that was also kind of when we transitioned to. Historically, the Booster Club was a male-only thing, and now we've kind of transitioned into a more of a family couples thing, which I think has been a good thing. It's been a really good thing.
Bring in the Scotus Mothers Club, really be part of the craft boutique, which makes sense. And, the other thing with that, I think it's gone beyond just the footballs, the basketball, the soccer's track, but now, hey, we got one act. We got speech, I remember, one act has been phenomenal for a number of years. I didn't even know we had that when I was in school. Maybe we didn't. I don't know.
Yeah, they did, but I wasn't involved.
It wasn't that. But for us as a Booster Club to say, Clyde, we're going to get you some more lights. We're going to get you stage props for this because you need that to have success. And
correct.
They've had success.
Speech team
got second yesterday.
State yesterday.
That's
awesome.
Pretty
awesome. Yeah. So it's good to see the school continue to excel, and I think having everything streamlined into one Booster Club with has definitely been a positive thing. So now Ian and Sophia are seniors this year. This is kind of your first go around as a senior.
It's gonna make me cry, John.
I know you're kind of an emotional guy, but it's kind of neat. Like obviously they're both involved in a lot of different activities, not just sports, but they're involved in a lot of different activities, and it does tug at you a little bit, because like when Libby was going through it, and you're an alum, but now you're a parent of your kids that are going to graduate. So what's it kind of been like to walk through now their senior year? Because it's coming up 6 weeks away.
This spring season just flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
It has been crazy because, because they were able to go as kindergartners at St. Bon's. And so they've been through the whole system now. And it's very, I'm proud of them. I'm proud of a lot of the kids, not just them, having coached and been involved. You see the successes of everybody, and it's neat all the different things that they have access to now, whether it's the sports, but also it's one act. It's the Revolution program through the Center for Survivors. My kids are at that, and that's really a cool thing that they didn't have back when we were there. There's Steubenville. There's JC Camp, there's God Teens, and my kids are all pretty involved in that. I think one of the proudest moments I had is when Sophia gave her witness talk in front of the whole school about a month ago, and she talked for 15 minutes about her faith journey, and it's made me better. Like I tell people all the time, my kids being here, St. Bon's, Scotus, has made me a better Catholic, has made me more rich in my faith because my kids are so rich in their faith, and it's not just my kids, it's all the kids. I mean, I think kids are probably making better choices than maybe some of us did back in the day because they're so around it. I mean, my 8th grade daughters had a Bible study with their friends that they just decided to do this week. Like that is cool, and that's because of the environment that's here. Yeah. I look at sports, and obviously, sports has been a big deal, but this has been such a good year just at Scotus in general with all activities, with cross country getting second place and seeing that happen. And Sophia, she's just been in cross country the last 2 years. She was at volleyball for 2 years, but she tried it. I think that's the other thing about Scotus that's cool is Ian did track for 2 years. Decided to do soccer. I remember reaching out to you about both my kids saying, hey, do you think my kids can do soccer? They haven't played soccer since like 5th grade. And you're like, we got them. We'll teach them. And John Bailey's the same thing. Like, we got him.
Yeah.
But they've really had that opportunity to go in. And that's not even talking about basketball. Like, again, we could be bawling here together about how awesome
that was fun.
The basketball one was run for the girls.
Yeah. This last season was amazing. Kim and I touched on that last week a little bit, but I think just sharing those moments and watching our kids go out there this year, and it was a lot of just good times, because it was just seeing your kids have that success. And like I said last week with Kim, it's like, Jared and the coaching staff, Joe and Mr. Peterson, I thought they just did a great job of listening to the girls this year, and the boys had a great run too.
Both teams. I mean, this was, I think the senior class, they looked at saying, hey, these guys are going to make some differences. And they did. They both had really good years. I think with the girls, I kept book for the girls this year, took over from Brett Rescher. And I'd done it for the boys on the road for the last few years. But just being there, and I could tell the difference with attitudes on both, but I think specifically girls with their run on how that was and how well coached they were, how much love they had for each other, I think is the other thing.
Yeah,
I think that
was fun to watch.
They developed that since third grade, right?
Yeah.
And now it was the epitome of, hey, we're here doing this together. And I'll say, even if we didn't make it to state, even if, it still was a phenomenal year, even if it finishes before that. But
I just think, the video of you in the district final, Sophia cuts her part of the net down and finds you. It was pretty neat because, you could definitely tell it choked you up a little bit. And I know it choked, you're getting choked up now, which is great because, we lost in that first round game, but, I think it was just the fact of we played good. We had a great run. We have that 16-0 comeback and had a chance at the end. And I think when it was over, it was just kind of like, it kind of hit you hard, like, you don't get to see them on the basketball court again, So it's, and we've transitioned now into the spring season, and we're having a good start here, and I think we're gonna have a good year. But it's fun having Sophia around, obviously, and I think and Ian scored the other night.
He did, yeah.
So I just kind of sat on the bench with the guys of that game, but but it's gonna be over so quick. And so, like, what are those two gonna do next year?
Well, Sophia, she's gonna go to UNK, so she's gonna go into nutrition. Exercise science is kind of the route she's going. She didn't really know what she wanted to do. In fact, she was very much, which I know Emma kind of decided fairly early, but she didn't know what she wanted to do, and she would get mad at you if you tried to ask her because she didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think she wrote an article in the paper even saying, like, all I get asked about is what I'm doing next year. Like, nobody cares. It's like this year's a waste almost. And
I remember reading that in the school paper.
Yeah, and I mean, it's true because it is. It's like, well, what are you doing?
And I think people just kind of expect these kids to kind of know what they're going to do, but they don't
7,
really
18-year-old
know.
kids, they
don't
know.
There's just so many different things that are going to change.
But she did. She met a professor, might have been a counselor there. They got her really excited around the opportunities of what that might look like in exercise science. She's type 1 diabetic, which has been, she was diagnosed at 7, so first grade. And so that's been a battle of hers. And I think she sees that as how can I, teach that or be around that in some way. So she's going to UNK. And then Ian's going to UNL. He kind of knew. He knew right away he wanted to go to UNL. He wants to go into engineering. He wants to go Pledge Farmhouse if he can. He's funny because we went on college visits together. So we went to UNK, we went to UNO, we went to UNL. And he was always like, why am I here? After we went to UNL, he's like, I'm going to UNL. I'm going to Lincoln. Like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
You got it.
Which will be that'll be an adjustment for those two as well.
It will be.
Going to different schools and being apart probably really for the first time.
It's funny because you would, I think being a boy-girl, it's different because they don't always run around with the same people. But every night, especially this year, it feels like they're doing homework together at night. Yeah. And so not to have that anymore, it'll be a transition. I mean, it's going to be, it'll be. But they're going to be awesome. Scotus prepared them well.
Yeah, and just kind of touch on that because we're getting close here to finishing up here a little bit. But being able to receive a Catholic education, your kids have been through the grade schools, going through Scotus now. What's it like for you and Ashley as parents too to be able to have your kids get a faith-based education? And how that's kind of set them up?
I think it set them up really well, actually. I think that you hear a lot about, hey, when you get out of school or high school and you're not in this environment anymore, it's going to be really hard. You got to find your ways. And, I think that what they've done here and the faith that they've been able to instill and the things that they're doing that, when you're going to a college and one of the first things you want to look at is what their Newman Center looks like, I think that tells you, like, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
We actually, and this is kind of fun. We went a couple weeks ago. Me and Scott Cameron took Caleb and Ian and Lane Neville to UNL. We wanted to go look at Farmhouse and just go look at a couple things at UNL. And Cade Weezy, who I know he was on this podcast.
That was a good episode. If you haven't listened to that episode, listen to it.
Cade's awesome.
Yeah.
So like we reached out to him and said, hey, could you show us Farmhouse? And that turned into, hey, I'm going to be with you all day. So we went up there with him, and he took the boy, like he drove with the boys when we moved to different places and went and had lunch. And I think seeing that and seeing how involved he is in his faith, obviously, but also other people like him that have gone to college and see it. I think Ian looked at that and said, man, I can have that because he's, very faithful. And so that tugs at your heart to say, okay, these kids have got to that stage where now you're always worrying.
Yeah, but they're going to be okay.
But I think they're going to be okay. I think a lot of that has to do with this.
Absolutely.
Again, Cade was awesome. And I remember saying, I asked Cade, I'm like, so what would you tell these boys here, the last couple months? And he actually said, he's like, spend time with your parents. Mm-hmm. He's like, because you're not going to get that here soon.
And, even with Libby, Libby's at College of St. Mary's, and just kind of seeing her growth in the last couple of years, just because now they're out on their own. And so when they come back, it's different. You have different conversations. You have your relationship's just a little bit different.
I'm sure.
And it's kind of exciting because, and now next year we're going to have Emma's gone, and now it's, your dynamic changes a little bit, but the relationship also changes in a positive way. And again, I think it's going to put you at a peace. I'll tell you, it's going to put you at peace knowing that the school prepared them well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I don't think I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then let's just kind of wrap up with this then, and this is kind of our regular question, but, how would you describe Scotus in a word?
I think of connections. I think I talked to Taylor when I did a little interview with him before, and I said family, and I think that's pretty evident in the way. But I think back to my situation, and I met my wife here. My career came from somebody from here. Coming back here and all the things that we've been able to do with Scotus, just being connected. And we didn't even talk about getting to know our old teachers again and those types of things. Mm-hmm. So that's what kind of stands out to me.
Yeah, and that is kind of a fun thing. Yeah, because it's the network expands a long ways, right?
It really does. I mean, it
expands wide, it expands vertically. I mean, the network of people that you can connect with through our time here has been big.
Well, and you look at, we didn't really talk about this, but the alumni basketball tournament, and as many people that come back to that because they have that connection to Scotus. It's not a fundraiser. Yeah. It's competitive, but people come back so they can sit around and get to, catch up with guys. That's, I think, why we came back so much, and our class did, because that was like a mini reunion every year that we got to have that connection with that you don't see everywhere else. No. It's not just lip service. You do not see that everywhere else.
Yeah. And those bonds are strong.
They are.
Our class with alumni soccer.
That's
our favorite time.
Yeah.
Well, Nathan, this has been really, really good time today. I've enjoyed it. I appreciate you coming in. It was great to hear about your journey as a Shamrock and how it's impacted you and your entire family. Thank you again for your service to Scotus and all the different roles. If you're interested in hearing more about the Shamrock Green Room episodes, subscribe to us and rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure to follow us on our social media channels, Scotus Central Catholic on Facebook, X, and YouTube, and Columbus Catholic Schools on Instagram. If you have some ideas for some guests on the podcast, please email me at coachbrez@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us in the Shamrock Green Room.